Hello there, and welcome to the Coast to Coast Sports Talk. I'm your host, Kristen Karam, and alongside me are the insightful analysts Cameron Collins and Dave Miller. There's a lot to talk about, so let's get to it. The round of 64 in the March Madness started this past weekend, and it did not disappoint with all the countless upsets that occurred. Cameron, what was your favorite upset?
I think my favorite upset was probably Mercer over Duke. It obviously wasn't helpful to my bracket, but at that point, it didn't really matter anymore. And I'm not a Duke hater, but I don't really like Duke. And it's always nice to see one of those, not that they're cocky, but they're always up there, and they're always expected to do really well. So it's always fun to see a team like that go down. And I was also surprised by the Kentucky-Wichita State game. I really didn't think that Wichita State was going to be challenged until they played Louisville. So that was also a big surprise. And the fact that they had the last shot in the game and they went for the 3-ball for the win at the buzzer and couldn't knock it down was a little surprising. But, those are the big surprises to me in the first couple rounds of the tournament.
I looked at the Battle of Ohio between Dayton and Ohio State, and that was just a battle for the year right there. When you saw the matchup Dayton and Ohio State, you knew that was going to be a great matchup. It wasn't going to be an easy path for Ohio State to get through. They were 10-9 in their last 19 games going into that tournament, so you knew maybe Dayton had a little bit of better momentum than Ohio State going into that game. And for Dayton to even carry it on and beat Syracuse as well, that's just what makes that first round upset so much better, is that they're still continuing it. And now they're going to play Stanford, who was another great upset against Kansas. But Dayton battled that entire time. They were up 10 with about 7 minutes left. Then Ohio State just made a run for it, and then it was just all pandemonium with the last final minute. Aaron Craft made a shot. Then Dayton went down, made another shot. Aaron Craft tried to get a last-minute shot. Foul or not, maybe, but it hit the back of the rim, hit the front of the rim. Beautiful game, and that's the way this tournament started, and it's been crazy ever since.
I feel like in situations like that, at the end of the game, refs they kind of hold back on the whistle a lot more because they know that they're going to be trying for the foul. They're going to be kind of trying to initiate contact and create a foul, like you saw with Aaron Craft at the end. He didn't really throw his body into anybody, but he kind of tried to go up between two guys, expecting that there would be some sort of contact. And then it didn't really come as much as he thought it would, and that's why he was able to get off a decent shot. And then there was no foul or anything, and just missed the shot. But Ohio State has kind of disappointed all year. They started off 15-0 and then lost 4 in a row. But yeah, like you said, Dayton, they came out. What did they have to lose? That's why I say, come in these tournaments. I feel like the low seeds actually kind of have an advantage because, nobody was really expecting much out of them. No one's expecting them to win. So, they have all the reason in the world to just lay it out on the court and go as hard as possible to make that upset. And when they do get that upset, that just carries that momentum into the next game.
Number 3 seed Iowa State took on number 6 seed North Carolina yesterday in the round of 32, and the ending sounded like this.
Down to 12 seconds. Kane across half court. He's up working against Tokoto. 7 seconds. Kane on the dribble right side. Drives it into the paint. Tough shot. High off the glass and in. 1.6 seconds to go. What do you have?
I believe Bill Borowski just told the TV guys that the game is over.
What was his explanation?
That when they recognized the timeout, that there was no time left.
That's what I thought. It's over, and the Cyclones win it. A game-winning bucket for DeAndre Kane. And the Cyclones have knocked off North Carolina. And by George, This team is going to New York after all.
How about that? What a comeback win for this team.
Dave, do you think this is how the game should have ended?
Honestly, I don't think this is how it should have ended. I feel like they should have put more time on the clock there, but for the mistake to happen, they had to figure out how much time, they had to speculate how much time had gone off the clock. Now, if they believe 1.6 seconds went off by the time Marcus Page got the ball, by the time they called the timeout past half court when he called it, because you also saw as he's running down half court, Roy Williams is calling a timeout as well. So I don't know whose timeout they're going off of, but for a great game like that to be decided by a monitor disappointed me so much. So I feel like there needed to be more time put on the clock, no matter how much time, 0.3 seconds or whatever, just to put an ending to it. But I also think Marcus Page put it on himself by trying to call a timeout with so little time left. So you figure with less than 2 seconds to get down the court that quickly and call a timeout and get the whistle called and stop the clock right away, I figured he just should have put up the 3 ball and see if it would have been a win or they're just going home.
Yeah, I mean, me and you, we watched the ending of this game, and it was definitely hectic. And yeah, it's a good point you made about Roy Williams trying to call the timeout, because that's the one thing that I think is also kind of controversial is if they would have granted the timeout when Roy Williams was calling it, they would have still had the ball in the backcourt, but there would have been about a second, even if they had started the clock right away, there probably would have been about a second left on the clock. So if they had given them that timeout, you never know, they would have at least been able to get a shot off. It's just, you never want to see a game end like that where a team doesn't even get the opportunity to get a shot off. Especially as fans, we want to see that last second potential game-winning shot. So, and like you said, the ball went through the hoop, maybe a little extra time ran off the clock. They didn't start the clock right away as they inbounded it. And, as officials, they can't just, say, well, we think this is how much would have ran off. So they had to make a decision. I think it's probably, the right decision in that circumstance. It's just, terrible that they ended up in that position because of, the clock workers. There was honestly 3 mistakes on that one play from the people working the clock, and if that hadn't happened, we might have had a completely different ending and maybe even a different result in this game. So, you never want to see a game end like that, but I do think the referees made, the correct decision in that situation that they were forced into. Now,
and also it's a topic for another discussion, but should we get to the point where it's just almost all computerized technology refereeing, or should there just be no reviews and just go by what you see? But that's the topic for another time, though, because for an ending to be decided 5 minutes after when it should have ended just puts a little more prolong on it, too, and people just want to find out who won right away instead of just waiting. Yeah, I don't ever think the human element should be removed from a game, but I think there are certain aspects of it that you can put a computerized, facet into it to, garner more accuracy. But I always think the human element in officiating is definitely great for sport.
The only undefeated team in basketball was defeated this weekend as the number 8 Kentucky Wildcats took down number 1 seed Wichita State. Cameron, do you believe Wichita State was overseeded?
I don't think they were overseeded. Like I said, you go undefeated in the regular season, even if you don't have the hardest schedule in the world, that's still really hard to do. As the pressure builds up, the further and further into the season you get, where you haven't accrued a loss. And so, and they didn't get the number 1 overall seed. If they had gotten the number 1 overall seed, I think people could maybe say they were overseeded. But I really don't think so. And like I said, I kind of think being a lower seed is kind of more beneficial, especially to a team like Kentucky that knows they're talented, because, they come up against a team, they go, we're number 8, they're number 1, so what? If we think we have the talent to beat this team, that's really all it comes down to. And like I said, I was surprised Kentucky beat Wichita State. Kentucky is a good team. I don't think they're going to have enough to beat Louisville, but, Wichita State, they just fell a little short. Alex Van Voot, he shot the game-winning shot. He only had 4 points in the game. He was in foul trouble throughout the ending of the game. So, when you have one of your playmakers struggle like that, you're going to have a hard time winning games. Just like any any big time player, if Doug McDermott went out there and has a terrible game for Creighton, they're probably going to lose. So I don't think they were overseeded. They just had a bad game.
Now, you look at last year with Wichita State's run. First of all, no one even knew who they were. Going as a number 9 seed, going up against Pitt and beating Gonzaga, and then people started to recognize who they were. There was no pressure on them last year. It was just go out and play and have fun. This year, going undefeated, going into the tournament undefeated, going for a 40-0 season. Like Kentucky went 39-0, and now they were trying to go 40-0 with one more game played. There was just too much pressure on them, I think. A young, I want to say inexperienced team too, even though they made a Final Four run last year, but they don't have a presence like Kentucky. They've been there so many times, won countless tournaments, second most among D1 schools. So, but at Wichita State, I don't think they were overranked, but they were in the toughest bracket too.
Yeah,
Kentucky,
definitely.
Louisville, Michigan, 3 of the Final Four teams from last year in one bracket, plus K-State, the lower seeded teams. And then you had Duke, who lost to Mercer, and Mercer's in the same conference as Florida Gulf Coast. So every team was a wild card in there. So I wouldn't have even been surprised had they lost to Cal Poly, though. But Wichita State had way too much pressure on them. So that's why I think it just got the best of them. And for Greg Marshall to go for the win from the outside instead of maybe create an and one down low kind of made me question his coaching ability at the end, too. Maybe just it's go big or go home. Maybe that's what he just said. So it was a great season, but he said that going into the tournament they were 0-0. Well, they end the season 1-1.
Well, we're halfway through the show. We've got a couple more things to talk about after the break. We'll see you guys in a minute.
I'm Dr. David Valentine in computer science.
I'm Nick Jones, public health major.
I'm Dr. John Buttermore, School of Business.
Sue Zerpley in the chemistry department.
Kurt Schimmel, the Dean of the College of Business, Information, and Social Sciences.
My name's Alyssa Posman, and I'm an early childhood major.
Marilyn, and I work in the communication department.
I'm Ian Maynard, I'm a computer science major.
Welcome back, everyone. We have 3 more topics to talk about, so let's slide in. With our last tournament talk, there are 16 teams left in the brackets, with a couple favorites surviving and also some Cinderellas as well. Dave, who's your favorite to win it all?
I mean, it's a toss-up now between the number 1 overall seed, Florida, longest winning streak in the country now because Wichita State and Stephen F. Austin both lost yesterday. And I believe it's 28 games now. And there's also Michigan State, who always makes a deep run into the bracket. But Florida, I think, has an easier path. Granted, it's an 0-6 matchup, a rematch of the championship game between Florida and UCLA coming up. And I think that'll be their toughest matchup until the Final Four, depending on who they go up against. Because even though Dayton has pulled off the upsets and so has Stanford, I still believe Florida will be able to get by both of them. So I'm going to have to put more money on Florida because they've been consistently better throughout the entire year. Like I said, 28-game winning streak, top 3 defense in the country points-wise. Also controlling the pace of the game between their opponents. You saw Pitt, they did run up and down the court against Colorado, but then Pitt couldn't do anything on a press right when Florida brought the pressure, and then Florida just built up enough of a lead where they just played back and just played smooth after that. So I think Florida can pull it off, and that'll be the 3rd number 1 overall seed in a row to win it all, which is kind of odd with all these Cinderella stories.
Yeah, I'm definitely all Florida. I thought Florida was going to win it from the start, and that really hasn't changed. My thing with Michigan State is, and I will use this as a legitimate stat, past 8 champions has had red or blue in their uniform colors. So that's bad news for Michigan State. So
how could that be legitimate, though?
It's
coincidence.
8 years.
It's coincidence.
I don't know.
So
it keeps
Kentucky.
happening. But yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a Florida-Louisville championship matchup. I think Louisville's going to find their way back in the championship game. But I think Florida is they're more athletic. And, when they have that 3-ball dropping, they're pretty much untouchable. And so I definitely think Florida is heads and toes, ahead of anyone on their their side of the bracket. I think Louisville will probably be their toughest matchup if they do go up against Louisville in the championship game. But I definitely see Florida coming away with it all.
And just looking at overall, if you want to take your little blue stat into comparison.
Blue and red.
Blue and red. So you have Florida
Blue
and
or
UCLA and Louisville and I guess Arizona as well as your last 4. So 4 out of 16, you still going with those odds?
Yeah.
All right, just making sure.
I'm just saying Michigan.
Oh, and Dayton,
I was just saying because you
Dayton
said
and
or
Stanford.
Michigan State.
So there's 2 more.
You said your other one was Michigan State, so I was just saying that's not going to happen.
It's just not legitimate, though. It's not.
Yeah, we'll see.
It's coincidence.
We'll see. I'll admit it if Michigan State wins it.
I'm going to cross my fingers for Kentucky. So.
Okay. All right.
The regular season for Major League Baseball started this weekend down under in Australia, where the Dodgers took 2 wins over the Diamondbacks. Cameron, what do you think of the boys in blue?
The Dodgers look pretty good in this series. They struggled a little bit with their bullpen, which is to be expected. That's kind of been their weak point, kind of all last year, and probably will be throughout this upcoming year. They've got a pretty deep rotation and a pretty potent lineup. Yasiel Puig had a rough showing in the first game, but then he kind of busted out to have a real good game in the second game. And I think one of the big factors of this series is the fact that the Diamondbacks ace Patrick Corbin, he has to undergo Tommy John surgery, so that's a big blow to the Diamondbacks. He probably would have gotten them potentially, near 20 wins this year, depending on, how much run support he received and, defensive backup behind him. But the Dodgers definitely look good in this opening series. If they don't go through a slump like last year where they have to, dig their way out of, into where they should be, we know they should definitely, if not run away with their division, be right behind and then, compete heavily in the playoffs. So the Dodgers played really well in this opening series in Australia.
Now, I look at the Dodgers, and they did have a rough start, but their pitching has always been one of the top rotations, always. With Clayton Kershaw being the only exception, everyone else underneath them either got injured or just had a bad season. You had Chad Billingsley, who was out for the entire year. He was going to be the number 2 man. So that really hurt him for most of the year until he got a little bit of a rhythm again. Kershaw in the first game dominated. Ryu in the second game went 5 innings, gave up a run, struck out 5, and walked 1. Their hitting's always going to be good with Yasiel Puig, with Andre Ethier, and you also have Matt Kemp there as well if he can stay healthy. But so it's going to come down to the bullpen and then the starting rotation being consistent, with the only exception of Clayton Kershaw, because he's basically the new Cy Young of the modern day baseball now. So the Dodgers, they should win another division title now. Are they? I'm going to have to say yes. No one in that division wows me. Patrick Corbin's out for the entire year. The Padres are the Padres. The Giants have been just an earthquake, basically. And the Rockies haven't really picked anything up. So Dodgers should be able to win this division.
Yeah, I definitely think that bullpen is going to be, kind of something to watch. The bullpen is kind of one of the most, underappreciated, underrated aspects of, a baseball team, because, your starter might be able to go out and go 7 quality innings every time. But, when he hands the ball over to your relievers, if they can't, hold it together and hold them off, you're never going to be able to trust that you can finish off a game. You might have to expect to jump out to a 5-6 run lead to really feel safe and secure. So if they can figure out, their bullpen and, their bullpen have, solid outings and just hold it together throughout this season, like you said, they definitely should run away with that division. And it'll be interesting to see what they can put together in the playoffs this year.
The NFL draft is a little over a month away, and the anticipation for the first overall pick for the Houston Texans is building up suspense. Dave, who do you think is going to be the heart of Texas with the first pick?
It's really a toss-up. I mean, if I go one position, there's multiple names, but it's either going to be at the defensive end, which is Jadeveon Clowney, who is just a freak on the line. And we saw what the Texans did in 2006 when all the talk was Reggie Bush, and then they go out and get Mario Williams. But now we see he's in Buffalo. So with what Matt Schaub did in Houston, put up monster numbers for a couple years, 4,000 plus yards each year, getting it to Andre Johnson, who's putting up like 1,500 reception yards, and Arian Foster putting up ridiculous numbers as well, the high as 1,800 yards in a season. So it kind of like irks me like why the Texans would just be so willing to get rid of Matt Schaub after like one really bad season actually, instead of him like trying to recover and build around him. If a quarterback goes in there right away, they're gonna get rid of Matt Schaub, but they also need to get position players around him besides Arian Foster and Andre Johnson, because when you have a running game that really works, when you only have one receiver, doesn't really help out. When you were in Ben's situation, having two running backs at the time, Willie Parker and Jerome Bettis, also having Plexico Burress and Hines Ward, and also Antoine Randall, he had weapons around him that made him look better. So I'm going to have to say the Texans are going to go after a QB, and that QB is going to be Teddy Bridgewater, but they also need to build around him, though.
I think you're right in the fact that they're going to go after a QB, but I honestly think it's probably going to be Johnny Manziel. Like you said, Matt Schaub having a, really rough year last year, got hurt at the end of the year before, and TJ Yates had to fill in for him, in the playoffs, which really cost them. They were had a great season and had a shot to go somewhere. But, they've really been down on Schaub, and I don't think any of their backups can get it done, so they definitely need a QB. And like you said, they don't really have any other weapons around. So I think, as much as I don't really think Manziel's the best quarterback in the draft, I think he brings a different skill set than a guy like Bridgewater does. And he's more dynamic. He has that big play possibility every single time. He's not, I don't necessarily think, he's that game manager, he's going to, chip away, drive you down the field. He's looking for that home run every time, whether it's him scrambling around and breaking away with his legs or, throwing a deep ball. I definitely think he's probably the best option for Houston right now as they try and build. But I don't necessarily, I think his size might play a big factor in the NFL. The way he likes to run around, he's not that big of a guy, so he might kind of end up being like a Michael Vick, getting hurt an awful lot. But, we'll have to see how he fares in the NFL. But, yeah, I definitely think Houston will be best suited to taking a quarterback, and I think Manziel kind of fits what they're looking for better than anybody else. Don't necessarily think he's the best quarterback in the draft, but the best quarterback doesn't always get taken first, as we've seen. Tom Brady, 6th-round pick. So, as much as I don't like Brady, his stats speak for themselves, and, so, we'll have to wait and see come draft day what the Texans decide to do.
It would make sense if he went to Texas because playing for Texas A&M.
Oh, yeah, hometown boy, and that's something, too, that, very disgruntled Texans fans last year, wanting to burn Matt Schaub jerseys. There was a supposed incident at Schaub's home, I believe, where, fans showed up at his home, and that would kind of, and I don't want to say, it's definitely not, you don't want to reward your fans, but, it kind of appeases them, giving them, that hometown boy that they can get behind, and I really think that would kind of bolster their fan base and turn it back around, giving the Texans organization a little more support from their fan base.
That's all we have for you guys tonight. We hope you enjoyed the show. Remember to like us on Facebook and check out the other shows on our YouTube page as well. From Cameron and Dave, I'm Kristen Karam, and this has been the Coast to Coast Sports Show.